"No, sir, that's not what it says." Her voice cut through the polished silence of the Nashville dining room. Every head turned as the billionaire's pen froze mid-signature, his empire of lies hanging by a single word she had just translated. The room smelled of oak-aged bourbon, steak fat sizzling on iron skillets, and a tension thicker than the velvet drapes lining the walls. This wasn't just dinner, it was theater, high-stakes theater, played out between men in tailored suits and women in sharp jackets, whose eyes rarely blinked. In the middle of it all stood a waitress, whose red blouse felt suddenly too bright, too loud. Her name was Naomi Carter, a 27-year-old woman who had never in her life sought the spotlight. She worked at the Garrison, an exclusive Nashville steakhouse where politicians, executives, and country stars mingled over prime rib and quiet deals. For Naomi, the job was supposed to be simple: serve with grace, stay invisible, and earn enough tips to cover rent. But fate had other plans. At the far end of the table sat Richard Alden, the billionaire CEO whose face graced magazines and business networks. His jawline looked carved from stone, his voice smooth enough to sell comfort to the desperate. Tonight, he was finalizing a deal worth $200 million with visiting Japanese investors. The table brimmed with contracts, crystal glasses, and a future bought with deception. No one knew Naomi spoke Japanese. No one knew she had studied the language during long nights at the public library, nursing dreams of traveling abroad one day. It had been her secret, her escape from the grind. Yet tonight that secret had leapt from her chest like fire. She hadn't planned it. She hadn't even thought. She only heard Richard misrepresenting a crucial clause, twisting foreign words into a lie so bold it made her stomach clench. And then, as if pulled by something greater than herself, she spoke. Now the air crackled. Eyes bore into her, some sharp, others wide with shock. Richard's hand trembled above the contract, pen still hovering, lips parting in disbelief. Naomi's heart pounded, but she did not waver. Across the table, Daniel Whitmore, a Nashville-born attorney representing the investors, adjusted his tie, studying her with something between awe and fear. He had always distrusted Alden's charm, sensing rot beneath the polish, but he hadn't possessed proof. And suddenly, here stood a waitress handing him the first crack in Alden's empire. Daniel's path had never crossed Naomi's before tonight, though destiny had quietly been guiding them toward this collision. His cynicism and her quiet courage were about to be tested. Together. Outside, Nashville's neon glow pulsed through the restaurant windows, guitars wailing faintly from Broadway honky-tonks just a few blocks away. But inside, silence ruled. Silence, and the weight of a waitress's words that could shift fortunes, ruin reputations, and spark something none of them had anticipated: truth, justice, and the beginning of an unexpected connection. Naomi's gaze didn't falter. She had no idea that her single act of bravery would spiral into scandal, danger, and a love story written not in fairy tales but in fire. Richard Alden's pen clattered against the mahogany table. His jaw tightened, the practiced charm draining from his face like water spilling through cracks. He leaned forward, voice low, deliberate, dangerous. "Excuse me, miss. What exactly did you say?" Naomi's throat felt dry, yet her words came out steady. "That clause doesn't promise joint ownership. It states exclusive control. If they sign, they're surrendering everything." A ripple of murmurs spread across the long table. The Japanese investors exchanged startled glances, their translator fumbling through papers, his cheeks flushing crimson. The room, moments ago drunk with laughter and bourbon, had turned ice cold. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I think you've misunderstood. Kindly step back and allow the professionals to handle this." But Naomi did not move. Her hands trembled against the tray she still carried, glasses quivering, but she stood her ground. She had spent years perfecting invisibility, the art of slipping unnoticed through crowded rooms, and tonight, that gift betrayed her. For once, every gaze was fixed squarely on her. Daniel Whitmore leaned forward, voice sharp. "If she's right, then this contract is fraudulent." His eyes locked on Naomi's, searching for any flicker of hesitation. Instead, he saw conviction. raw, unpolished, but undeniable. Richard laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. Fraudulent? Are we really going to entertain the interruption of a waitress? Naomi's stomach twisted. The weight of humiliation threatened to crush her, yet something stronger pushed back. She remembered late nights hunched over borrowed textbooks, whispering Japanese phrases until the words became second nature. She remembered her grandmother's voice, reminding her that silence protects the powerful, but truth protects the soul. Her chin lifted. Check the document. I'm not wrong. The investors demanded clarity. Papers rustled. Sweat collected along Richard's hairline. The polished billionaire, always in control, now looked cornered. Daniel rose to his feet, sliding the contract toward Naomi. Show us, line by line. Her hands steadied. She traced the characters, translating aloud, her voice weaving truth into the thick air. Each phrase dismantled Richard's empire brick by brick, until the gleam of his fortune looked like ash. When she finished, silence held the room hostage. One investor whispered to another. The translator nodded, confirming every word. Richard slammed his palm against the table. This is outrageous. You don't know who you're dealing with. Naomi met his glare. Neither do you. At that moment, Daniel felt something shift, not just in the room, but inside himself. He had watched plenty of deals crumble, witnessed corruption dressed in silk ties, yet never had he seen a single voice pierce so cleanly through deceit. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a reckoning. The investors stood, murmuring their refusal to sign. Richard's empire trembled under the weight of exposure. Naomi's knees nearly buckled as adrenaline drained from her body. She had spoken. She had survived. But what now? Daniel caught her arm gently as she swayed, steadying her. Their eyes met for the first time without the barrier of chaos between them. A flicker of something unspoken passed between them. Curiosity, gratitude, maybe even destiny. And now, dear listener, pause for a second. Think about Naomi, a young woman in Nashville with nothing but courage in her chest, daring to challenge a billionaire. If you're still here, it means her bravery already gripped you. And if her story matters enough for you to keep watching, shouldn't you also hit that subscribe button? Otherwise, you'll walk away like the bystanders in that room, silent, invisible, letting courage go unnoticed. Don't do that. Subscribe, so voices like Naomi's are never ignored. The dining room emptied in uneasy silence, as though the chandeliers themselves had witnessed treason. Investors left with hurried bows, their translator avoiding Richard's glare. Naomi slipped toward the kitchen, her tray shaking so violently she feared the glasses might shatter. She had spoken truth, but truth carried weight heavier than any tray she'd ever balanced. Inside the kitchen, the air smelled of garlic butter and charred ribeye, yet nothing grounded her. Co-workers stared wide-eyed, whispering questions she couldn't answer. Her manager stormed toward her, face crimson. "What the hell did you just do, Naomi?" His voice cracked like a whip, she stammered. I only translated, "You humiliated our most powerful client. Do you realize who he is? Do you realize what you've done?" Her chest tightened. She wanted to vanish, return to the safe rhythm of pouring wine, smiling politely, collecting tips. But invisibility was gone, stripped from her the moment she spoke. Meanwhile, Richard Alden remained at the table, jaw grinding as he barked into his phone. "Find out who she is. Full name, address, everything. Tonight." His empire was stitched together with secrets, and one waitress wasn't going to unravel it, at least not if he could help it. For Richard, resistance meant retaliation. He had built his fortune crushing threats before they sprouted. Naomi Carter would be no different. Daniel walked out into the Nashville night, neon lights reflecting off puddles along Broadway. Honky-tonk guitars wailed in the distance, laughter spilling from open doors, yet his thoughts stayed chained to the red-bloused waitress. He replayed her words, her unshaken stance, the way her voice cut sharper than any lawyer's objection. He pulled out his phone, typing a message to the investors. "She's telling the truth. Don't sign anything with Alden." Yet even as he hit send, doubt coiled inside him. Lawyers weren't supposed to gamble careers on strangers. She could vanish tomorrow, leaving him exposed. Still, something about her courage gnawed at him, refusing to let go. Naomi clocked out early, the restaurant manager muttering about damage control and lawyers. Her paycheck would likely shrink. Maybe her job wouldn't last the week. She trudged down a quiet Nashville street, the evening air heavy with barbecue smoke from nearby food trucks. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake tonight. Walk away while you can." Her stomach dropped. She spun around. Empty sidewalks. Only the hum of cicadas. Fear pressed against her ribs, cold and suffocating. Naomi shoved the phone back into her bag, walking faster, her heart echoing footsteps that weren't there. Back at his penthouse, Richard poured whiskey into a crystal glass, hands steady again. He dialed another number. "She speaks Japanese. She embarrassed me. Handle it." He watched the city lights glitter from his window, confidence returning. He'd buried bigger problems before. Naomi Carter would regret the night she dared open her mouth, and yet Naomi couldn't regret it, not fully. Lying in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of her small apartment, she replayed the faces around that table. The investor's shock, Richard's fury, Daniel's gaze, steady and almost protective. She whispered into the darkness, "What have I done?" Her heart answered with silence, but deep down she knew she had told the truth, and truth always demanded a price. The next morning, Naomi's alarm blared at 6, dragging her from restless dreams. She sat up, bleary-eyed, only to find another message waiting on her phone. "We warned you, stay quiet, no name, no number traceable, just the same blunt threat." Her hands shook. She almost deleted it, almost convinced herself it meant nothing. But fear tightened around her throat. This wasn't paranoia. Someone was watching. By 9, Daniel Whitmore strode into the courthouse downtown, briefcase in hand, heart still echoing last night's chaos. He told himself to focus on the day's hearings, but Naomi's voice haunted him. He had replayed it in his head all night, the conviction of someone with nothing to gain, everything to lose. During a recess, his phone buzzed with a call from one of the Japanese investors. "Mr. Whitmore, is that Waitress safe? If Alden believes she ruined his deal, he may retaliate." Daniel froze. They were right. Alden's history was littered with ruined rivals, crushed under lawsuits or scandals until their names vanished from headlines. Naomi Carter was no executive. She had no shield. That afternoon, Daniel tracked her down. He found her outside the garrison, standing by the dumpster, tying her apron strings with trembling hands. "Naomi Carter." She turned sharply, defensive. "Who wants to know?" He showed his card. "Daniel Whitmore. I was at the table last night." Her shoulders stiffened. "If you're here to tell me I embarrassed you too, get in line. My boss already chewed me out." He shook his head. "I'm here because you're in danger." Her laugh was short, bitter. "Danger? I'm a waitress, not a spy. You exposed Richard Alden in front of his investors. That man doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget." Naomi wanted to brush him off, to walk away and pretend last night never happened. But the messages on her phone still burned. She studied Daniel, his crisp suit, steady gaze, the weight in his tone. He wasn't exaggerating. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Because something in you reminds me what truth looks like." But he didn't say that. Instead, he replied, "Because if Alden takes you down, he takes the rest of us with him. And because someone has to stand with you." The words lodged in her chest, unsettling, almost too much to carry. That evening, Daniel insisted on walking her home. They moved through Nashville streets where neon signs flickered to life, music spilling from every bar. Naomi kept her arms crossed, her guard high, but her eyes softened when he slowed his stride to match hers. "You don't know me," she said. "Maybe not. But I know Alden, and I know what happens to people who cross him." She stopped in front of her apartment building, a tired brick structure tucked between a pawn shop and a taco stand. "This is me. Thanks for the escort." Daniel glanced at the cracked windows, the broken porch light. Vulnerability hung around her like a second skin. "At least let me give you my number. If anything happens, call." Naomi hesitated, then saved it reluctantly. "Fine, but don't expect me to call." That night her phone buzzed again. No threats this time, just Daniel's message. "Stay strong. Truth matters." Naomi lay awake, staring at the glowing screen. For the first time since speaking up, she didn't feel entirely alone. Meanwhile, in a penthouse above the city, Richard Alden swirled bourbon in his glass, smirking as his investigator laid a thin file on the table. Naomi Carter's life reduced to paper, address, debts, vulnerabilities. Richard tapped the file with one manicured finger. "She thinks she embarrassed me," he murmured. "She hasn't learned what humiliation really feels like." The following morning, Naomi's manager cornered her before she could clock in. His voice dropped to a whisper, sharp with warning. "Richard Alden called. He wants you gone, effective immediately." Her chest hollowed. "Gone? For what?" "You embarrassed him." "That's enough." Just like that, her job evaporated. She yanked off her apron, dropped it on the counter, and walked out into the Nashville sun with nothing but a thin envelope of last week's pay. Daniel found her sitting on the steps outside a shuttered record shop, head in her hands. For a moment, he hesitated. Approaching felt intrusive, but when she glanced up, tears shimmering but unshed, he knew leaving wasn't an option. "Rough day," Naomi scoffed. "Try catastrophic. I just lost the only steady paycheck I had." He lowered himself beside her. "Because you told the truth." "Because I didn't know when to stay quiet," she muttered. Daniel studied her profile, the stubborn tilt of her chin, the exhaustion lining her eyes. "That's not a flaw, Naomi. That's courage." She let the silence stretch before speaking again, voice softer. "You want to know why I learned Japanese? My mum worked double shifts cleaning offices. My grandma raised me most nights. She always said, 'Find something that makes you more than the world expects.' I couldn't afford college, but the library was free. Japanese felt like a doorway, like maybe one day I'd step through it and escape." Her throat tightened. "Instead, I'm still here, serving tables. And now I've painted a target on my back." Daniel listened without interruption. He heard not just the words, but the weight beneath them. A girl who had dreamed of flying only to find her wings clipped by circumstance. Across town, Richard Alden flipped through the file on Naomi. Her debts, her late rent, her grandmother's medical bills at a local care home. A cruel smile spread across his face. Weakness, vulnerability, leverage. He made a single call. "Put pressure on the landlord. See how fast she folds when she has nowhere to live." Back on the record shop steps, Daniel said carefully, "Naomi, I can't undo what happened, but I can stand with you. The investors are filing complaints. If you testify, you could help bring Alden down." Her breath caught. Testify. The word felt heavy, dangerous. "You're asking me to step into a war I never wanted. I'm asking you not to walk away from the truth you already told." Her pulse thudded. Fear wrestled with something fiercer, the same stubborn spark that had pushed her to speak out in that dining room. And now if you've followed Naomi this far, you're not just a spectator. You've walked with her through humiliation, loss, and courage. But let me ask you this. Are you going to vanish now, like the friends who ghost when life gets messy? Or are you going to stay to support her by subscribing, proving you don't abandon people when they need you most? If Naomi can risk everything to speak truth, you can risk one click to stand with her. Subscribe. Don't be the silent one who looks away. Naomi wiped her face, forcing a shaky laugh. "You make it sound like I'm a hero, but heroes don't sit here broke and jobless." Daniel's gaze held steady. Heroes look exactly like this. Broke, scared, but unwilling to back down. For the first time since that night, she let herself meet his eyes fully. In them, she saw no judgment, no pity, only belief. And belief, she realized, was more dangerous than fear. Daniel insisted on buying Naomi dinner that night, arguing she needed real food after a day like hers. She resisted at first, pride bristling, but eventually relented when her stomach growled loud enough to embarrass her. They ended up at a small diner tucked off Music Row, far from the glitter of Broadway. The place smelled of frying onions and fresh coffee. Neon signs buzzed softly above booths where truckers and musicians nursed late-night meals. Naomi sat across from Daniel, staring down at her burger as though it might vanish if she blinked. "This feels weird," she admitted. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Weird how? Like I'm on a date with my lawyer, or maybe my bodyguard. I don't even know what you are to me right now." He chuckled. "Fair. Maybe I don't know either." The sound of his laugh surprised her. It was warmer than she expected, almost boyish. Something in her chest loosened. They ate in silence for a while. Then Naomi leaned back, sighing. "You know what's funny? I studied Japanese for years, dreaming of Tokyo lights. And the first time it ever mattered was at a steakhouse in Nashville, humiliating a billionaire." Daniel grinned. "That's not funny, that's fate." "Fate?" She rolled her eyes. "Sounds like something you tell yourself when life makes no sense." "Or," he countered, "it's what happens when preparation meets the right moment. You were ready, Naomi, and you changed everything." Her cheeks flushed, caught off guard by his conviction. Most people had dismissed her, underestimated her, but Daniel looked at her like she was the sharpest blade in the room. For the first time in days, Naomi laughed, really laughed. "Careful, Whitmore. If you keep flattering me, I might start thinking you actually believe in me." His smile softened. "What if I already do?" The words lingered between them, heavier than the jukebox hum in the corner. Naomi looked away, biting her lip, heart beating faster than she cared to admit. After dinner, they walked back toward her apartment. Nashville's streets pulsed with music and life, fiddles, banjos, voices spilling out into the humid night. Daniel kept close, not in a way that smothered, but enough to remind her she wasn't walking alone anymore. At her door, she paused. "Why are you doing this?" He tilted his head. "Doing what?" "Protecting me, standing up for me. You don't owe me anything." Daniel's voice was low, steady. "Maybe not, but I've spent too long watching men like Alden crush anyone in their way. You didn't bend. You reminded me what it means to fight." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small. Instead, she whispered, "Don't make me regret trusting you." "You won't." For a fleeting second, neither moved. Then Naomi slipped inside, closing the door gently. Daniel stood in the hallway a moment longer, staring at the worn wood, his chest heavy with something he couldn't name. In her apartment, Naomi leaned against the door, her pulse racing. For the first time since the storm began, she felt safe. Not completely, not permanently, but enough to breathe, enough to hope. Yet outside, the city hummed with unseen danger, and somewhere in a penthouse across town, Richard Alden studied her file again, circling vulnerabilities like a predator marking prey. Naomi had found a fragile bond, but fragility breaks, and Richard was sharpening his strike. Rain pounded Nashville like a drumline, streets slick with reflection. Naomi hurried down Broadway, clutching her jacket tight, when headlights cut across her path. A black car slowed beside her. The tinted window slid down. "Miss Carter," a voice called, cold, rehearsed, dangerous. "We need a word." She froze. Before she could move, the door opened, and two men stepped out. Sharp suits, hard eyes, Richard's men. Daniel had warned her. She should have called him, but pride and fear of leaning too much on him had kept her silent. Now, that silence cornered her. They blocked her path, one shoving an envelope into her hands. "Consider this an opportunity. $50,000, cash. You disappear, tonight, or things get unpleasant." Her stomach twisted. She shoved the envelope back. "I'm not for sale." The man smirked. "Everyone's for sale, some cheaper than others." Naomi's hand trembled, but she held her ground. Finally, they slid back into the car and sped away, leaving her soaked, shaking, clutching nothing but anger. By the time she reached her apartment, Daniel was already waiting, suit damp, hair plastered from the rain. Relief flickered across his face until he saw her expression. "What happened?" Naomi dropped her bag onto the table. "You knew they'd come, didn't you? You knew Alden would try to buy me off." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I suspected. And you didn't tell me." "I didn't want to scare you." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Scare me? Daniel, I was standing in the street with men threatening me like I was nothing. Do you know what that feels like?" His voice rose. "I'm trying to protect you, Naomi." Her eyes flashed. "Protect me or control me? Maybe you're not different from him at all." The words cut. Daniel stepped back, wounded. "You really believe that?" Silence. Rain hammered the window. Naomi's chest heaved, her throat raw, but she didn't take it back. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Daniel poured himself a drink he didn't want. He stared at the amber liquid, hearing her words over and over. "Maybe you're not different from him at all." The comparison burned. He had built his career fighting sharks like Alden, yet in one moment she saw him as just another predator in a suit. Across the city, Naomi curled up on her couch, hugging her knees, rain dripping from her hair onto the worn fabric. Guilt twisted in her gut. She hadn't meant it. She knew Daniel wasn't Richard, but trust, once cracked, never felt whole again. Richard Alden, meanwhile, received the report with satisfaction. Good. Drive a wedge. The weaker their bond, the easier the fall. He lifted his glass, toasting the storm outside. For him, victory wasn't just about money. It was about crushing anyone foolish enough to challenge him. Naomi had dared. Now he would make her regret it. In the quiet hours of the night, two people who had found the beginnings of connection now sat in separate apartments, each questioning the same thing. Was I wrong to believe? Was I worth the risk? And the fragile hope that had carried them began to feel like nothing more than a cruel illusion. Nashville's storm broke by morning, leaving the city washed clean, streets glittering under pale sunlight. Yet inside Naomi's apartment, the air still felt heavy, like the downpour hadn't ended. She moved through the silence, restless, replaying every word she'd hurled at Daniel. "Maybe you're not different from him at all." The sentence echoed, louder than any thunder. She pressed her hands to her face. What did I do? Her grandmother's old photo sat on the table, smiling in black and white. Naomi remembered the stories about courage, about not running from truth. But courage was easier to talk about than to live. Right now, she wanted to vanish. Across town, Daniel sat in his office, blinds half drawn, untouched papers scattered across the desk. He hadn't slept. The bottle from last night still sat open, glass abandoned. He tried focusing on legal briefs, but Naomi's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Protect me or control me? He slammed the file shut, chest tight. He had spent years promising himself he wouldn't become like Alden, yet her accusation gnawed at him, as if some hidden part of it might be true. Finally, he whispered to the empty room, "Am I protecting her because it's right, or because I need her to believe I'm good?" Naomi pulled on her jacket and wandered down to the riverfront. Couples strolled hand in hand, laughter mingling with music drifting from nearby bars. She envied their ease. She couldn't remember the last time life had felt light. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Carter," the voice drawled. "Richard Alden." Calm, venomous. "Shame about last night. You could have had a future. Instead, you're clinging to fantasies. That lawyer won't save you. He'll turn on you the moment it suits him. Men like us, we don't change." Naomi gripped the phone tighter, pulse racing. "You're wrong," he chuckled. "Then ask yourself why you feel the need to convince me." The line clicked dead, leaving her trembling. His words wormed into the cracks of her doubt. That evening, Daniel drove aimlessly, ending up in a church parking lot on the outskirts of town. He wasn't religious, not really, but he sat there anyway, staring at the cross silhouetted against the fading sky. What am I doing, he thought. Why does she matter so much? Because she had believed in him. Because for the first time in years, someone had looked past the suits and titles and seen a man still capable of choosing right over easy. And he had let that belief slip through his fingers. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over her name, then stopped. Pride held him frozen. Fear of hearing silence on the other end. Back in her apartment, Naomi sat by the window, watching street lamps flicker on. She thought of the diner, of Daniel's laughter, of the way his eyes softened when he said he believed in her. She wanted that moment back. Her fingers drifted to her own phone. She stared at the screen, debating. Pride whispered, he should call first. Fear warned, what if he doesn't pick up? But something stronger nudged her, the memory of her grandmother's words. Find something that makes you more than the world expects. Naomi tapped his name and pressed call. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, Naomi? His voice was rough, uncertain. Her throat closed, relief flooding her chest. Daniel, can we talk? Silence stretched, heavy but alive. Then softly he answered, yes. For the first time in days, a fragile thread connected them again. Thin, breakable, but enough to lead them out of the storm, if they dared follow it. The courthouse in downtown Nashville buzzed with tension. Cameras crowded the steps, reporters jostling for sound bites. Inside, rows of spectators leaned forward, waiting for a scandal to either erupt or collapse. At the center of it all, Naomi sat stiff-backed, palms damp against her lap. Daniel leaned close, his voice steady but gentle. You ready? She met his gaze. For the first time since the storm began, she felt anchored. Yes. Richard Alden entered with his usual swagger, suit sharp, smirk sharper. He scanned the room, eyes landing on Naomi. His smile widened as if to say, you'll fold. But Naomi didn't look away. The judge called the session to order. Papers rustled, and then came the pivotal moment. The contract. The same document that had sparked everything at the steakhouse now sat in plain view. Miss Carter, the attorney asked, can you tell us what this section says? Her chest tightened. The memory of that night flashed. Linen tablecloths, gasps, her own voice cutting the silence. And once again, she spoke with clarity. No, sir, that's not what it says. The courtroom fell still. She translated every line flawlessly, exposing the deception word by word. Investors shifted uneasily, realizing the scope of the fraud. The judge's brow furrowed. Richard's smirk faltered. By the time she finished, the empire Richard Alden had built looked less like stone and more like sand. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Daniel shielded her, guiding her through the chaos. For once, Naomi didn't feel small. She felt powerful. Naomi, a reporter shouted, how does it feel taking down a billionaire? She smiled faintly, voice steady. It feels like telling the truth. That evening, as the city lights flickered across the Cumberland River, Daniel and Naomi walked the bridge together. No noise, no cameras, just the quiet hum of Nashville night. Daniel stopped, turning toward her. I owe you an apology, for not trusting you with everything, for letting my pride get in the way. Naomi shook her head. I owe you one too. I shouldn't have compared you to him. You're nothing like Richard. For a moment, silence stretched. Then Daniel asked softly, so, where do we go from here? Naomi looked out at the skyline, lights shimmering like new possibilities. Forward, together. And if you've walked with them through every storm, through fear, betrayal, and fragile hope, don't let their victory fade the moment the video ends. Imagine Naomi standing alone in that dining room if no one had listened. That's what happens when you watch without subscribing. You hear the truth, then leave like it never mattered. Don't do that. If this story gripped you, if you felt her courage, subscribe now. Because voices like hers deserve to be remembered, not forgotten. Daniel reached for her hand, hesitating only a second before their fingers intertwined. Naomi squeezed back, steady, sure. "You believed in me when no one else did," she whispered. "And you reminded me why the truth is worth fighting for," he replied. Above them, the city thrummed with music and life, a song of second chances, unexpected love, and courage rewarded. For Naomi and Daniel, the storm had passed, and what remained was not just survival, but something deeper, something beginning.